Hello, welcome to Coming to Know Yourself. Uh, Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your time and your attention, and I'll do my best to show you the way back to the inner peace inside and the fullness of love that we were all meant to be living. And in this video, I want to have a conversation about the way we ended up in this life of struggle, of suffering, the human condition. You can see a lot in the world that there is a lot of suffering, a lot of negativity, a lot of darkness, just general dissatisfaction about life. And so, how did we get here? We look at little children and they come into a world where they are yet to even understand what they're heading into. And deep inside, as adults, we kind of know that children are protected for a little while and that they're going to have to, what we call, lose their innocence and become an adult and take on this burden that we all tend to think is the rite of passage and the way that things just have to be. But it's not necessarily the way it has to be. And we can actually go back to the way we were when we were children, except now we have the wisdom, the hindsight of, if we only knew then what we know now, we would live a different life. And we can do that. We can take this perspective of the suffering, this heaviness, this place that we've come to in our lives, where we've looked back on our lives and go, man, I could definitely change a lot of things about my life if I only knew what I know now. And we don't have to sit in regret and look back in the past. We can let the past go and move forward with that hindsight. The challenge is we wish that we were children again, and we can have what we had when we were children again, only with a fully grown body and a lot more freedom. And so in this series, in this video, we're going to talk about the way we got to the point we're at. And so we're going to go back to when we were little children. And so let's go back to when we were first born as infants, and we opened our eyes to this life. And regardless of whether we were born into a poor situation, abusive situation, a rich situation, we're all born with a clean slate and pre-knowledge, the same knowledge. We're all born equal in the knowledge that we have within our hearts and within our minds that allows us to see life the way we first opened our eyes to experience consciousness and awareness. If we didn't have a certain amount of knowledge, we would not be able to experience consciousness and awareness and even experience life. And like animals have their own natural instincts, pre-knowledge that they experience and live life that tells them and guides them on how to be. But when we were first born, we had pre-knowledge that taught us and showed us and guided us to be who we were at that time. And now we have different knowledge, the knowledge that we've gathered throughout life, the knowledge that we learned in school, that we read in books, the experiences, the trauma, interactions with each other, has gathered a set of knowledge that now we see life through a different lens. And most of that lens is darkness and suffering, dissatisfaction, yearning and wanting to be the way we were when we were first born. And so let's go back to that moment when we opened our eyes. And at that time, when we were looking through the lens of life, fresh and new, the only knowledge that we had to have perspective, to have perception of life, was the absolutes of love, which is the total fullness of unity to all things, the total fullness of relationship to all things, the oneness of being connected to everything in an unconditional love for everything. We had no judgment, we had no suffering, we had no anxiety, no self-hate, no regrets, no shame. We had no negative knowledge. We just had the positive polarity of just love. And so we experienced life through just feeling and enjoying life, enjoying ourselves. We are the life. And so we were experiencing the love of our life, just that euphoria, that bliss, that joy of just being. And so we shared that love with everybody else. And that was the knowledge we had. We had the absolutes of love. And the way we shared that love with others was through the love, the knowledge of love that we had. So we had the knowledge of gentleness, kindness, complete forgiveness, no judgment, compassion, empathy, balance, unity, harmony with all things. That was what the things that we expressed. That's how we expressed the love inside us. And then the pre-knowledge that we also had was the knowledge of the absolutes of truth. And so the absolutes of the meaning of life. We knew the meaning of life, and that meaning, that knowledge gave us the meaning of life, which told us that we were a part of life. It told us that knowledge told us that we existed. Without that knowledge, we wouldn't know we exist. And that knowledge of truth is called the self-knowledge. It's what told us to ourselves that we exist in life and that we are part of life. And the knowledge of love told us how to relate to life and how to express life. And so because we had this knowledge of existence, we didn't feel like this feeling of not belonging. We didn't have this feeling of needing purpose or longing for meaning, because we knew our meaning, we knew our purpose. We were love, and we expressed that love through joy and happiness and this brightness, this light in our eyes. And we didn't have any guilt about how we went about life or insecurities. We didn't have other people's judgments telling us how we should be. We just simply were being and accepting that, yes, I'm a part of life. This truth tells me I exist and that I am the meaning of life, that I exist in this life, and my purpose is to love and to be loved. And so we didn't have any inner conflict. We had literally inner peace. And so we were just enjoying life. But the thing that we didn't have was that hindsight. If I only knew then what I had compared to what I know now, we didn't have the knowledge of the darkness, the suffering, the lacking, the anxieties, all the negative polarity of life. We didn't have that experience, that knowledge. And so we didn't know the treasure, the true treasure of what we had. We didn't know that we had a self-identity that we were made in when we were first born, which the scripture says is the image that God made us in the beginning of our life. We are born in the image of God. And that image is the absolutes of love and truth, which allows us to see through the lens of God the perception, the experience of life known as heaven, which is total peace inside, no suffering, total light-hearted. And the lightheartedness expressed the light in our eyes. Just like when Jesus says, if thine eye be single, then thy whole body be full of light. So we're lighthearted because our eyes were looking through life through this single perception of just love and truth. And so our whole body was full of the positive polarity of life. We were experiencing that inner peace, that bliss, that heaven. We were born with that peace of heaven in the image of God. And that was in his likeness, which is that total love and peace and that bliss and that joy and no judgment. And then as we go about life as young children, we don't have the wisdom to know how precious that love and peace and joy is. And so we just kind of put it in the background. We're like, yeah, that's who I am. I have this truth that tells me what life's all about. Cool. I'm really interested in what's going on outside of me. What is this new life I'm born into? What's going on? What are all these people? So we started really focusing so much on our five senses and gathering input, sensory input, knowledge, experience, learning. And as we went through life, we kind of just put aside our original instincts, our original knowledge that we're born with, that self-identity, that image that God made us in, off to the side. And as we gathered new knowledge, we created a new self-identity. And so now our perception is no longer single. Our body is no longer single. So now we have a divided heart. And so now we are starting to fill our hearts with the darkness. That's why Jesus says, if thine eye be full of darkness, our whole body be full of darkness. And so what we did is when we made that new self-identity, it was empty, and we started filling it with experiences. And so at about 2 years old, we were able to identify with our own reflection of our body, which created an image in our minds of a body and the experiences. And so that was when we formed the contrast to what we were born as, the positive polarity, the love and the truth. And so that contrast is the negative polarity. We didn't know what this life is all about, so we created a self-image of ignorance, of not knowing the meaning of this life. We knew the meaning of the life we were born into, which is the absence of love and truth, the image God made us in, but we didn't know the meaning of this human life. And so that contrasting image we create is the negative polarity, and that's where the suffering, the ignorance, the uncertainty, the anxiety, the fear, that's where all the negative aspects of knowledge is stored and formulates our self-identity as the human being. We still experience the image we were born as, the love and the peace and the truth, and we have fleeting moments of coming back to seeing life through that image. Oftentimes when we have moments of joy or happiness or feel moments of peace, because that's the positive polarity of our being. But for the most part, we're always looking through that lens of the human identity that we formed. And at about 2 years old is when we formed that identity, and we began really living this human life, soaking everything in. And everyone that's already gone beyond that 2-year-old point, and they've already formed their human self-identity, they now are eager to teach the young children the way of being human. We were born into the way of the truth, the way of life, the way of love, the way, the truth, and the life of our being. Now we are learning the way of the human life, the human ignorance, the human darkness, the human suffering. And so the first thing that we're taught is that joy and happiness come from things and doing and experiencing this human life. But the trouble is the more we take in the sensory experience, the sensory stimulation, the more we gather and fill that human image with those experiences, everything that we gather, even the memories, require the conscious energy and the emotional energy of the joy that we had stored in the image God made us in. And what we sacrifice are levels of consciousness and degrees of awareness. And so the more we fill ourselves, our hearts, with this human identity, we start losing that joy, that light in our eyes, because in order to gain all that knowledge of the negative polarity, we have to sacrifice that joyous energy of consciousness and that emotional energy of awareness. And so by the time we're teenagers, we are so low in emotional energy and lack of that connection to the truth, that meaning of life. We lack that awareness of understanding and the abilities of reasoning and logic that allow us to understand the meaning of life and deduce and have that higher consciousness of what's going on around us. And at the same time, we lost that high energy, that conscious energy, and that really centered emotional energy that we had by burdening ourselves with gathering all this experience and knowledge into the negative polarity of our being, with the new identity as a human being, that now we feel kind of lost as teenagers. We feel kind of, we don't feel that satisfaction anymore. And we don't understand because we don't realize that we've filled our hearts with so much heaviness, and we've forgotten who we truly are as that child of love and peace and truth and the meaning of life, of that joy. And so we feel lost, and since we lost that meaning of life and that truth, that pre-knowledge we're born with, now we feel lost in the world. We don't feel like we belong. And so now we're looking for places and people to feel that, where we start longing for that belonging. And so now we're really vulnerable to feeling accepted and liked. And because when we left behind that pre-knowledge of love behind, some of that pre-knowledge is self-acceptance. That's part of love. And so when we lost that by focusing on that human self-image, we start looking for self-acceptance out here with other people. So we're fall victim to judgment, and so we start being easily manipulated to form a human identity based on pleasing others and trying to get that validation and acceptance from other people. So the more we grab onto trying to figure out how to be accepted and to be pleasing and loved by others, because we left behind the self-acceptance, the self-love in that identity that God made us in, we start scrambling to try to understand this life and how do I fit in? And the more we scramble, the more we add to our hearts of the self-identity as a human, and the more we experience as a human, the more we adulterate our minds and our hearts of the image we were born in. And that's when we become adults. And we have that heavy heart and that suffering and that regret. And we don't know what to do with our lives. And we're always wanting more and seeking more because now we have a void in our hearts. Because our identity is split between two knowledges. The knowledge of two ideologies. The knowledge of love, peace, truth that we were born as, and the knowledge of the human way of self-gratification and seeking and wanting and yearning of that negative polarity. And so we have a void in our hearts that we're trying to fill. And we spend every day pursuing the happiness that we once had, that joy as children out there. But the more we pursue and the more experiences we have and the more memories we gain, the heavier we become, because all of our memories to hold on to all those memories, it sacrifices more conscious energy, more emotional energy, which sacrifices consciousness and awareness, because when we sacrifice emotional energy, we're sacrificing emotional clarity, which then sacrifices the inner peace that we were born in. And so now our reasoning, our logic, our understanding, our abilities to really see life clearly is severely compromised. And so we feel lost in our own suffering, and that's when we can fall into depression, and that's when we start grabbing onto escapism and ways of emotional stimulation to basically distract ourselves from this loss of who we once were. And the more we seek emotional crutches of things and habits and addictions and grab onto these things that make us feel temporarily happy, the deeper we fall from that high state of consciousness, from that high state of awareness of understanding the meaning of life, the more we lose inner peace, the more suffering we fall into, because we're grabbing onto the negative polarity, trying to fill our human identity with understanding, and really we're just harming ourselves emotionally and spiritually. And what we really need to do is go back to what we were. We need to let go of the human identity, empty ourselves of all the knowledge we gained, everything that we believe in, the way of the human life, the experiences, and learn to have faith in that pre-knowledge again. Bring that pre-knowledge back to the way we see life. Learn to love ourselves again. Learn that instinctual way of being as children is the way we want to go back to. And the more we go back to being the way we were as children, through having faith in expressing love and loving ourselves, the more we empty ourselves of that human negative polarity, and our clarity comes back, the inner peace starts to form inside of us, our minds start to become less burdensome, and we start coming back to who we are and having more faith in love again and less faith in all the negative aspects of our human identity. We no longer feel powerful, need to feel powerful with pride and arrogance and gossiping and judging others and being opinionated. All the negative polarity of the human ideology starts to fall away. And that's when we can let go of that ego. That ego of the human identity is actually a symptom of the emotionally generated outlook, ego, the alter ego, the sacrificial ego. We sacrificed who we were for this ego, which is this human identity, and has caused us to now live through an emotionally generated outlook. We're emotionally affected by everything because we're in a state of suffering all the time. We're easily agitated, we're easily upset, we're easily hurt. We're in a constant low state of sadness, which kind of rises and falls. And we're always looking for ways to medicate that through the pursuit of happiness outside of ourselves. But the more we pursue things in want and escapism and self-gratification, the worse we make our emotional well-being, because everything that we pursue and add to ourselves for the sake of that emotionally generated outlook and to medicate ourselves from this lack of satisfaction of life continues to deplete us of inner peace, emotional stability, emotional energy, conscious energy, the understanding of the meaning of life, the ability to reason and have logic and understanding. We just continually worsen ourselves. And so finding ourselves as being adults in this state of suffering is the journey of going into the darkness, into the negative polarity of life. And it was meant to be that way so that we could get hindsight. If I only knew what I know now, then I would not have formed a human personality. I would not have caused myself to go into this ego, this emotionally generated outlook. I would have had faith in the knowledge I was already born with. That I don't need anything else to experience life. I could just enjoy life, and I don't need to add any kind of knowledge, human wisdom to it. But see, the trouble is this humanity has corrupted their own way of living for so long. All the language, all the information, all the knowledge that's in the media, that's in the books, that's in the reading, that's in the way we interact with each other, is based on that negative polarity. It's based on division instead of relationship to all things. It's based on, separation from each other than it is being open and into unity. And it's based on chaos instead of balance. So when we come into this world, the image of darkness, of division, of suffering exists in all the knowledge and all the things we can possibly learn outside of us. All of humanity's knowledge is the knowledge of darkness and suffering, because that's the human condition. And so all of our knowledge and all of our expressions and all of our information and all of our media and all of our TV shows and movies and music, all of that information streaming out there is based on that negative polarity of suffering. And so as children, we just soak it in, and it's natural that we're going to fall into that darkness, into that suffering, learning that negative way of being. And now we need to unlearn that negative way of being and bring that image, that original information that we were born into as who we really are, and wake up to that truth that we are. And I'll have a video about the awakening to that true image, that true self that we are. Now we have two selves. We have the original I am, that I am, the one that told us that we exist, the very presence, the self-knowledge that told us I exist, this is my presence, this is my being. And that self-knowledge, now that we've separated ourselves from it, we forgot it, is now just a causal recognition. And we call, when we're all by ourselves, that self-knowledge that tells us that we exist, that it tells us of our presence, that it allows us to know we exist and that we are the meaning of our life, is now just the causal recognition of, I feel my presence as this feeling of being alone. So now we recognize this, our true being, as the feeling of being alone is something separate from us. But in the beginning, that feeling of being alone, that alone feeling was the feeling of all one, because it was who we are. It told us that it is our presence, it is the meaning of life, and that we are the meaning of that life. And it told us that we exist, and it was the truth. It was the I am that told us that I am this I am. It tells me that I exist. And it's still there. That is the true self, and that's what tells us that we're alive and that we exist, and it's our presence, it's our feeling of our spirit that we say when we say I feel alone. We're really saying I feel my spirit, my being. And so that's kind of like on autopilot now, but we don't associate it as being who we are. So then we're not experiencing that love, that peace, that truth, that joy as our primary experience. We're not seeing through the lens that God made us in his likeness, seeing through that love, peace, and joy, except for in fleeting moments when we have something that makes us feel happy, or we have a moment of a situation that feels elating, and then we switch to that to feel that elation. But then we switch right back. That's why happiness always seems to slip through our fingers and fade away. Every time we have a moment where we feel truly happy, it's because we only feel it for a moment because we switch to feeling that image God made us in, and then we go right back to that human image of the negative polarity, the negative contrast. Because thine eye is not single, we're full of the light and the darkness. And so if our body's is full of any darkness, it's pretty much full of darkness. We pretty much are focused on that human negative polarity. And so now we have to come back to that truth, awaken to that truth, fill our hearts with love, which will cleanse out the negative polarity. That's why Jesus says, first clean the inside of the cup, then everything else will be taken care of. And the first step to getting that human darkness out of us is to disempower the ego, the human-generated, the emotionally generated outlook. We have to stop looking through emotionally generated outlook and start creating an outlook that's a conscious outlook, making true conscious choices of how we're going to see life and express life. And so we have to make a conscious choice to express love and give love to ourselves and learn to love ourselves. Because before that, we were living through an autopilot, a reactive outlook on life, emotionally reactive through that ego. And so Jesus says, humble yourself like a little child, or you will not see the kingdom of heaven. And the kingdom is our state of mind. The kingdom is the mind, and the heaven is the experience that God made us in his likeness, in the image he made us in his likeness. And so we must humble ourselves so that we're always putting down that human image, and now walking the narrow path of the way, forming a new self-identity, kind of like a bridge between the negative polarity and the image that God made us in, that is now the way, the new identity of living consciously through expressing love, giving love to ourselves, loving everybody else, filling our hearts again with that pre-knowledge we were born with, the natural instinct. We are beings of love. Our natural instinct when we were children was to express love and be love. You can see it in children's eyes up until about age 2 or 3, until that darkness starts to come in. We call it the terrible 2s, 3s, 4s, because they start losing that self-image they were born in, and they start learning the human way of thinking and being, and now they're seeing through the darkness, and they're starting to learn to express darkness. And we're thinking, well, what happened to my kid? He's starting to have the terrible 2s. Well, what happened was they are letting go of the image they were made in, and they're starting to learn to be a negative being, the human suffering, the human condition. And so it's not that they're doing anything wrong. They're just learning how to be a human, how to become an adult, how to adulterate their minds and their hearts. And so now we must go back to the way we were before we went through this journey of darkness and falling away from ourselves, falling away from that grace that God gave us through that image that he made us in. And because Jesus became that way to that truth, to restore that life, that image that God made us in, he became that image, and now it's the Christ image. that the image that God made us in is now that truth as the Christ image. And so now Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. The way, which is unconditional love, to love. That's why he preached all the time. Love your neighbor, love as yourself, turn the other cheek, humble yourself, follow my commandments, love yourself and God and everyone else, and do not judge, and everything will be taken care of. Empty your heart. The way is love. To that truth, which is the image that God made us in, which is all the absolutes of love and truth, to see through that single perception of the light. And that light is the life, which makes our body full of light. And so that life is that image that God made us in, which is the fullness of love, and that truth that I am of that love and truth. And Jesus teaches us on the narrow path of the way how to come back to that. And so in this video, I just wanted to talk about the journey of how did we get here? How do we get from being that child that runs around playing and not worrying about anything, and that light in their eyes of pure joy, and the fearlessness to express themselves to strangers and anybody around and not worry about whether people think we're weird. And now we have these masks that we put on to be accepted and not made fun of, and to be only a certain way around this person and only a certain way around these kind of people. You know, how did we get that way? How do we fall into this suffering and this darkness? And it's because we were influenced to make a whole new identity and fill ourselves with another identity, the identity of darkness. The human identity is the suffering. It is the negative polarity. And if we want to be that love, that peace, that truth, that everlasting happiness, we can never add to the human identity. We can't be who we are now and add the love, the peace, the truth into that self-identity as knowledge outside of us, because there are two different polarities, the negative polarity of suffering and the positive polarity. We have to get rid of the negative polarity because we are the love. We are the peace. We are that truth. We are that joy. The way we experience that perfect love is by being it. That's why children naturally just are that joyful love and peace, because they feel it. They feel the love. When we're first born, we don't even know what language is. We're not caught up in the mind with constant compulsive thinking. We don't have that language. The knowledge of love, peace, and truth, that pre-knowledge, is knowledge experienced through the heart. It's knowledge of feeling. So we were living life through feeling, through the heart, instead of living life through thinking. And so our human identity is all thought. It's all memories and knowledge and beliefs and opinions and judgments and trauma. And so we have to learn to let go of thought-based personality and go back to the heart-based personality, looking through the lens of our hearts, through feeling, being brave to be vulnerable and live through our hearts, to allow life to come to us and go through us, and not, avoid things. Oh, I don't like that, or I don't feel right with that. It makes me feel uncomfortable, or I'm afraid, or I have anxiety, or I feel anxious, and I'm blocking these things. Our knowledge of love was open in unity and acceptance. We just let life flow to us and through us. And the things that are difficult to experience, it's like wind. It just blew right through us, and our hearts were still empty, and we still had that joy even when the tough times came. And so we have to have faith that love will guide us through that, and start learning to live through the lens of love, through feeling and seeing through the heart, instead of thinking and seeing through the ego. Because any understanding we try to find through the mind is going to be deceptive. It's going to be through the darkness. The ego will only offer us fear and anxiety and pleasure and guilt and shame. All the negative polarity. The ego and the human identity will only ever offer a perspective of darkness. It will only give us suffering. The only time we experience peace, joy, and understanding and truth is when we're in that positive polarity. And a lot of times, like when we take a break from our life and we want a vacation, for a moment we set down a ton of our attachments to our human life and our human identity, we set a part of ourselves down and we leave it at home and we go somewhere else and we feel lighthearted for a little while and we experience a little bit of that original image we were born in. But then we go back to our lives and back to work and we go right back to that human identity. And so we're like always longing for that, thinking that we can get it by doing things and buying things, but it's not the vacation and doing things and buying things that allows us to experience that. That's just the satisfaction of wants. That's emotional medication. That's pleasure. That's not true happiness. It's when we let go of those burdens and then we left for a while, when we let go of some of our human identity, that suddenly we're gaining back levels of emotional energy, of conscious energy, and we're gaining back levels of consciousness and awareness, and we're getting a little bit of clarity on life and feeling a little bit of inner peace. So with that emotional clarity, we have clarity on life, and we feel a little more lighthearted about our own lives, and we start to see a little more understanding, because understanding comes from having that emotional clarity. It's just that we can't go on vacation for 10 years or 18 years when it took us to become an adult. If we could go on a complete vacation for 18 years and reverse ourselves from the adult life, that would be great. But unfortunately, we have to learn to live the adult life and sober up from all that negative way of living and come back to living through the attributes of love. And so in this channel, we will learn the way through the attributes of love to come back to that truth and restore that life, to see through the single eye of that light that fills our whole bodies, our soul, our hearts with that lightheartedness, and restore that image of pre-knowledge we were born with, our natural instincts, to really enjoy and love life and let go of that negative polarity. It's not that we lose who we are, it's just that we're not meant to be the human identity forever. We're not our memories. I mean, if you think back to when you were 8 years old, you're not that person when you were 8 years old or 13 years old or 15 years old. Our memories don't they don't determine who we are. They are just hindsight, And so our human identity is just wisdom, the contrast of what we were, which is love, peace, truth, the light. And now we're experiencing this human darkness, the suffering. And so it's kind of like a negative on a film. You have to shine light through it to see the picture. We create this negative experience, this human identity. And then when we come back to the lightheartedness, the light, the love, the peace, the truth, and shine that through our past, our negative experience, then we get a whole picture of who we really are, because now we get to experience what we're not, that suffering, to really see the love, the truth, and appreciate being a being of love, a being of peace, living in that truth, that light that we were made in God's image, seeing through his likeness, being the heaven. Heaven is not a place, it is a state of mind, and the kingdom is the mind. And we were born with a piece of heaven. As children, we don't remember, but as children, we were experiencing heaven. That's why when people are so drawn to holding an infant in their hands and just feeling that love just permeate from them, because they are being the heaven. We are experiencing a piece of heaven that came from the heaven. And then it slowly fades away as they turn into adults, because they're losing that image. It's fading into the back of their minds, and their hearts are being filled with the darkness of the human polarity. And now we've become adulterated with all that knowledge of the division and separation and fear and anxiety. And so in this channel, we're going to learn how to come back to knowing ourselves in that love and that truth, awakening ourselves back into who we once were, and letting go of the human identity. We've got to let go of the entire human identity. All of our memories, all of our past, all of our opinions, all of our beliefs, everything we've ever read, everything that makes us feel egotistically powerful and confident, and learn a new way of confidence, true confidence, which is having no fear of judgment, no fear of being accepted or needing acceptance. That's true confidence. And so learning to love ourselves no matter how people treat us, standing fearless in being made fun of or rejected, truly learning to love ourselves, having self-respect, to not allow that negativity of others to change how we feel, and to always stand solid in loving ourselves. Just like little children, like when a child's like 2 years old, you can make fun of them like we do with adults, and they just look at us like, so what is your point? What are you talking about? It's not that they don't understand the knowledge we're trying to tell them. It's that they don't fill their hearts with negative knowledge and harm themselves with judgments and accept people's negativity. And so we got to learn to love ourselves. And then as we love ourselves, we will fill ourselves back up with that love, and we'll naturally radiate it and love others, because we'll be being that love. And the more we be that love, the love is the medicine which actually heals our emotional well-being and brings us back to that inner peace. Because then we start feeling and experiencing the clarity of looking through the light of love. And so then we restore our consciousness, our awareness, our emotional clarity, our reasoning, our logic, our understanding returns, and we actually return to our innocence. Because innocence isn't, oh, you lost your innocence because you made a mistake that's really bad, or you lost your innocence because you had sex before marriage, or, innocence is regaining your inner sense. When we're born as children, we have full inner sense of that pre-knowledge we're born with, of that perfect love inside, and that truth that tells us the meaning of life, and that inner peace, that feeling of all one. Instead of feeling alone, we're in that all one feeling of being connected to all things, the relationship to everything, that full awareness. And so that's what we'll come back to, is that inner sense. And we will trust ourselves again, and we won't feel lost. And we won't need to feel like we belong somewhere, because we'll have that belonging inside, and we'll trust ourselves again. And we won't be easily manipulated by people's opinions and judgments, because we'll have faith in that inner knowing, that inner knowledge we were born with. And love will be the knowledge we have faith in to live life and to give us meaning, because love is the meaning of life. It's the true way, the truth that allows us to live life and have that all one state again of being whole, and having that singular perception that fills us with that lightheartedness, to have that joy we had when we were little children again, and not have the burdens of compulsive thinking, because we'll no longer be living through the human way of seeing life through thinking. We'll be living life through the heart and being connected with life and everything around us. And we won't feel separated anymore and lonely, and we won't identify with that feeling of alone anymore as loneliness and isolation. We'll identify with that alone feeling as who we are, as the all one feeling. And that all one feeling will be then a feeling of our presence, which will be self-awareness of the I am that I am. And we will no longer be able to be told who we are. We'll say, I am that I am, and I am love, and I don't need anyone's validation to tell me who and what I am, because I feel all one, and I am at peace, and I don't need all this out there anymore. I am back to who I once was, in the peace inside, and I know the meaning of life, and I am at rest, and I am just living and being in the now, in the moment. And I don't need this human constant want and searching for happiness out there. I don't need to pursue happiness anymore, because I'm content, because my heart's at rest. I'm no longer suffering, and I'm breathing, and I'm emotionally still, and I don't have the suffering anymore, because I'm full of the light, and I'm not emotionally treading water every day, trying to get by one more day, feeling okay, because now I am okay. I understand, and I don't want to go back to being that human negative polarity anymore. I'm glad that I'm finally back to being the way I was when I was first born. And now I have the wisdom to know where I have been, and I'm not going back there again. So that's where we're going on this channel, to coming to know ourselves and awakening that love and truth on Jesus' narrow path of the way, the truth, and the life. And even if you're not into scriptures and Jesus, we will use just regular language to learn about how to come back to ourselves. The universal language of love. Love is the truth. It is the universal truth of all things. Without love, nothing would exist. Love is relation, and the act of a relation is awareness. And if even the very particles of all physics of the universe were not relating, they would not bind, connect, unite with a balance, a harmony to sustain their existence and being without that relationship. And so the very force of love, the force of relation, creates all of reality, all of the universe. So love is the meaning of life. It is the force that allows all things to exist. Consciousness awareness is everything. It isn't just part of our body, it's part of everything. And so the more we come back to ourselves, the more we'll be connected to the universe, to Mother Nature, to ourselves, to God, to the meaning of life, to ourselves, in that love, in that peace, in that joy, in that true contentment that is the happiness. And we don't need to search for happiness anymore. So until then, you have my compassion for your suffering. I've gone through it, I understand. It took me 15 years to come back to that truth and restore the life within me and to know that love again. And I'm working every day to make videos to show you the way to that truth, through that life, through Jesus' teachings, and from my own insight and my own experience. One step at a time, we'll come back together to emptying that suffering from your heart and finding that light in the life that you once had. Until then, you have my sympathies and my love and my peace. Take care.